Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Mr. Mackenzie's Distance Learning: The Causes and Effects of 20th Century Wars, the Spanish Civil War, Foreign Intervention, Part 1. Let's begin now. So, obviously, this lecture we will be discussing the foreign intervention in the Spanish Civil War. So, we'll be looking at which governments are getting involved, and which sides they're getting involved, and for what purposes they're getting involved. So right now we're in the year 1936, the beginning of the Spanish Civil War, and let's take a look at the governments that are going to be getting involved. The first one we're going to look at is Germany, and we know Hitler is the leader of Germany, and he has been in power for 3 years at this point in 1936. He has already begun his remilitarization programs. We see the remilitarization of the Rhineland has begun at this point already. So things are the wheels are starting to turn within Germany and their war machine. Italy is another country that's going to be getting involved in this civil war. Mussolini has ruled Italy since 1922. We've already, at this point, by 1936, gone through the Abyssinia crisis, so we've seen Italian aggression happening already. In the Soviet Union, in Russia, we have Joseph Stalin as pretty much dictator of the Soviet Union, and he has begun his show trials and purges of his political enemies. Purges is basically the idea that he's just trying to clean house of anyone he feels is not 100% loyal to him. And anyone he felt was his political enemy was going to be put on these show trials, meaning they're just for show. The outcomes have already been decided. We know Joseph Stalin is a very paranoid ruler, so anyone he believed that was against him, he was going to eliminate. So those are going to be the three major countries that get involved in the Spanish Civil War. Other countries that we will be discussing today is Britain and France. Okay, they are pretty much on the sidelines for this civil war. Ultimately, they're really fearful of another European war. They're very hesitant to get involved. We really see, if anything, appeasement being born here within the Spanish Civil War. So by 1936, war begins in Spain. Both sides of this civil war found support from regimes of foreign countries, like we just discussed. The army rebels' pleas were soon answered first by the Germans. Now, at this time, Francisco Franco is not a fascist. If anything, he's really a conservative monarchist. But he was supported by European dictators that were fascist. So ultimately, Franco is going to evolve and become a fascist as well. Now, by the summer of 1936, Hitler's thoughts were really far from Spain. So what was he doing at this time? Okay, Hitler is very busy with things going on in Germany in 1936. What is he doing at this time? Well, we know he was building a war machine for his own purposes. He was looking for expansion into the east and the repression of his opponents inside Germany. We know from a lot of those excerpts of Mein Kampf, we know that Hitler had his goals of what he wanted to do: defeat communism, find more living space for the growing population, and to tear up the Treaty of Versailles. Now, Hitler promised Britain that they would not intervene in the Spanish Civil War, would not get involved in Spain. This is really double talk by Hitler. At this point, he had already sent aid. Basically, 2 days after the Spanish uprising, Franco had appealed to the Fuhrer for help. Now, he had already sent aid there. Now, the thought of the Straits of Gibraltar falling into communism was really enough for Hitler to send much more than what Franco had asked for. So what is Hitler going to send? He sends a full squadron of Junker transport planes to airlift the Spanish Foreign Legion out of Morocco. Now, Hitler's not doing this just out of the goodness of his old heart. He's going to want to see something in return. So what is Hitler going to want in return? Ultimately, Hitler's help is going to be rewarded. Okay, his help will be rewarded with a constant supply of Spanish iron ore, which is really going to help a great deal for Germany to prepare for the world war that's about to come, for the next world war. But by 1936, this was a war that most people thought could be avoided. But with us, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that World War II is just around the corner. Okay, now let's look at the Italians in 1936. So by 1936, Mussolini had not really become one of Hitler's pawns yet. That happens a little bit later. Mussolini's invasion of Abyssinia proved that he was going to take aggressive actions. Mussolini wanted to make the Mediterranean a Roman lake again. But really, there's going to be a challenge to the entrance of this lake. If you look at the map here, we know where the Mediterranean is. We can see the entrance to the Mediterranean is the Straits of Gibraltar there. And that is fully controlled by Spain. So if Mussolini wants to make the Mediterranean a Roman lake again, he has to really befriend and help and support Spain. And if they're fascist and he's fascist, it's going to make it a lot more easier to control. So Mussolini allows right-wing military groups to train on Italian soil. Even by 1934, Mussolini wrote that he would support monarchists in a plot to overthrow the Republic and aid them with weapons. So after the initial uprising, Mussolini supplies the rebels with 12 bombers, the first military hardware to arrive in Spain. Okay, let's look at the French at this point. And here's our map of Europe. We should know where France is on this map. If we don't, I think we're in trouble at this point. France, geographically, is going to be in a tricky spot all of a sudden. Just kind of to the south of them, in Italy, Italy is a fascist-held government with a dictator with Mussolini. To their east, they have the National Socialists, led by Adolf Hitler, basically fascists. And now to the west, with this Spanish Civil War, we see Francisco Franco, the head of a fascist political group. So now it looks like France is going to be surrounded in what could be called a fascist triangle around them on the continent. So France is in kind of caught between a rock and a hard place and seems to be surrounded by fascist governments. So really, the French are going to want to, if anything, support the Republic in Spain and help them. So France didn't want to be trapped in a fascist triangle caught between Germany, Italy, and Spain. So the French Prime Minister, picture seen there, Léon Blum, goes to London to discuss collective security with Britain. Now, before arriving in London, the French Prime Minister orders that weapons be sent to Spain. Obviously, they want to support the Republic. But the British Prime Minister wants, at all cost, to avoid another European war and feared it could start in Spain. So the British Prime Minister is going to put kind of a lien on Léon Blum to stop that shipment of supplies to Spain. Do not get involved because this civil war could escalate into a continental, if not world war, that they are not ready for. And due to that shifting public opinion within France, Léon Blum had put a stop to his shipment of arms to Spain. August 2nd, 1936, French cabinet was looking for interested governments for a pact of non-intervention. And obviously, Britain would agree to this. So ultimately, what's going to happen now is France is going to close its borders. It's no longer going to send aid and supplies to the Spanish Republic, and it's going to close its borders, and in a pact with Britain will become non-interventionalists. Now, at this point, the Spanish Republic really kind of feels let down. Under international law, Spain was legally entitled to buy arms abroad, but the non-interventionalists stopped that. Now we'll look at the Soviet Union. Within Germany, the communists were the first group targeted by the National Socialists, a sworn political enemy of Adolf Hitler, the communists. They were the first group to be attacked. Now in Spain, we had what was known as La Pasionera, Dolores Ibarri. Now she is a communist, and she is a communist member of the Spanish Parliament. Her rhetoric rallied worldwide support for the Republic. And it's really going to be communists who feel this call and will travel to Spain. A lot of volunteers from other countries with communist leanings will travel to Spain. They will hear this cry from La Pasionera to travel to Spain and pick up arms and fight for the Republic. So the Soviet Union will answer the call. The Soviet Union organized an international column of volunteers. Now, Stalin's going to have his doubts about helping out the Republic in the Spanish Civil War. Why? Why does that look bad to get involved in this civil war and helping a republic and not staying quiet in the East? Why does Stalin have his doubts? Well, although Stalin does have his doubts, at this time, in 1936, he's trying to woo Britain and France as possible allies against Hitler. And really what he's going to fear is communist action and support in Spain might actually scare them away. Because Stalin knows war against the National Socialists or the Fascists is going to happen, and he's really going to need Britain and France's help in that war. And this could scare them away. So what Stalin does bring, or does send over to Spain, are ambassadors, advisors, and much needed food. As a result, Germany and Italy will increase their support to counter the Soviet involvement. Germany and Italy officially have a joint front now against communism in Spain. No longer just giving aid, they have troops and material and supplies. Events in Spain drew Germany and Italy closer together. The Rome-Berlin axis. Okay, now we're going to look at the United States and Britain and what their response to the Spanish Civil War was. So, what is the United States doing in 1936? What is going on in the good old US of A? Well, the world is very different in 1936. The United States and the rest of the world really is in the grips of the Great Depression. America is still enjoying the Neutrality Acts and isolationism from problems that are going on in Europe and Asia. So the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is really going to ignore the Spanish conflict. And ultimately, it's going to allow Texas oil companies to supply Francisco Franco, the fascist leader of the rebels, with fuel that he's going to use for his war machine. Now, if we look at this political cartoon, we see here a cartoon that is very critical of the United States' response to the Spanish Civil War. Here we see a Spanish worker trying with all its might to push back the storm of the swastika that's heading his way. The impending doom and world domination of the National Socialists and Fascists. The last stand before America was Spain. So the Spanish worker with all his might is trying to push back and hold off this attempt at world domination. If it crushes him, we'll be next. And there in the foreground, we have kind of a worried Uncle Sam who's watching this whole thing, enjoying isolationism. There's a ocean between them, but once Spain is crushed, looks like they're the next stop. South America and North America are the next on the road to world domination. So very critical of the response of the USA. In London, the non-intervention powers will examine allegations of Germany, Italian, and Portuguese intervention. Countries that said they weren't going to get involved, but were getting involved anyways. The skies over Madrid were controlled by rebels, reinforced by German and Italian planes. The Spanish Republican Air Force was no match for this, really, until Soviet planes finally arrived. "15 weeks after the start of the war, the Republic's capital, Madrid, was on the front line. The rest of the Republic was to the south, and the army rebels, the nationalists, held the north and west of the capital. Land offensive began on November 7th. 25,000 men, the nationalists attempted to capture a city of 1 million inhabitants. No Pasaran. No Pasaran. Basically meaning they shall not pass. Right? I get images of Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. You shall not pass. They shall not pass. Really becomes the slogan in Madrid and really of all Republican Spain. Ultimately, what we're going to see here is that Franco is surprised that his army meets resistance by the citizens of Madrid. The government under Caballero, the Republican government, leaves the capital for the safety of Valencia, as did many of its population. But preparations also began to defend Madrid, and everyone who was there got involved. And they would not let it fall. They shall not pass. That's where we're going to stop here. This has been part 1 of foreign intervention in the Spanish Civil War. Tune in next time for part 2. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.